We got Gonzaga versus San Francisco, part 3. Will Mark Few's team play in their 26th consecutive WCC Championship game on Tuesday? And will Randy Bennett and the Gaels be the opponent?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday. Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Gametime. Folks, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, today is a special episode of Locked On Zags. It is my first episode after becoming a father. Layla Mae Patton born on March 8th, 2024. Incredibly excited to have a new member of the family. She was due in April, but she decided she wanted to be a part of the March Madness, or for those of you on YouTube checking out the shirt, March Zagness. Very excited, very exhausted, but also looking forward to today's episode. We got some mailbag questions to get to. We also got, of course, a quick preview of Gonzaga versus San Francisco. We've already seen this game play out twice. We don't need to get too far into the weeds. We'll talk a little bit about the St. Mary's Santa Clara matchup as well. Also got some other highlights around Gonzaga Nation updates. We got an update on Lisa Fortier getting another nomination for Coach of the Year award. We got Kelly Olynyk update in the NBA. Got a Zags baseball update to wrap us up as well. We're going to start, though, with tonight's game. Gonzaga, San Francisco, third time this season, Monday night, 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, ESPN2. The game is, of course, being played at the Orleans Arena in Las Vegas as part of the WCC Tournament, the semifinals. It is the nightcap after the St. Mary's Santa Clara game, which will take place at 6 p.m., also at the Orleans Arena. That game is on ESPN. Gonzaga's on ESPN2. Not sure exactly how it plays out that way, but not exactly a huge deal. We've talked a bunch about San Francisco on this podcast throughout the season. We talked about them before Gonzaga and San Francisco met for the first time. We talked to Coach Chris Gerlofson before that matchup. That was the close game in Spokane where Chris Gerlofson and the Dons started fouling early, or not early, but earlier than typical, I think, with about 2.5 minutes to go. Ended up being a very close game. Gonzaga still won, but some struggles at the free throw line from Anton Watson from Ryan Nembhard made that one a lot closer than we expected. Then, of course, Gonzaga played San Francisco in the Chase Center last week. That was a huge game. That was basically the game that cemented Gonzaga a spot in the NCAA tournament, regardless of what happens after this point. After that point, they then went ahead and beat St. Mary's and really put a stamp on it after that. But, of course, the main common denominator between those two games really was the dominance of Graham Ike. And what we've seen from San Francisco since then is some struggles. Since Gonzaga beat them at the Chase Center, they have lost 3 of their last 4 games. I guess including that loss, they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. They lost at St. Mary's. No shame there. That's a tough place to win, although Gonzaga, of course, pulled it off a few days later in Moraga. They lost at St. Mary's. They beat Pepperdine. They lost to Gonzaga at the Chase Center, and then they lost on the road at Santa Clara. 3 of their last 4 were losses for the Dons. The Dons, like the top of the WCC, dominated the bottom half. Dominated the teams that were the Portland Pilots, the San Diego Toreros, Pepperdine, Pacific. Beat those teams pretty good, although San Francisco actually struggled with Pacific. They went into overtime in their first matchup against them, but undefeated against the bottom half. But the top half of the conference kind of beat each other up in a lot of ways, and we saw that with this loss to Santa Clara for San Francisco to kind of end the season on a bit of a whimper. However, they got a bye in the WCC tournament, didn't have to play until the quarterfinals, played the Portland Pilots, beat them very badly. They got a little bit of momentum coming into this game because they beat Portland by 21 points. It was 72-51 was the final score there. San Francisco shot 45.5% from 3, actually about 46% from 3, 11 of 24 as a team. Marcus Williams had 16. He made 4 of those threes. Jonathan Mobo had just 9 points, but he also had 8 rebounds and 4 assists. Again, continues to be a multifaceted player who can do a lot of things, but doesn't really dominate offensively the way that I suspect he's capable of doing. I know that Coach Gerlofson has talked about wanting him to be more kind of ball dominant and ask for the ball a little bit more and be more assertive. A conversation that Mark Few had with Graham Ike earlier this year that has paid off tremendously, as Graham has been absolutely dominant really all season long. And we had a lot of talks last week about the fact that he was shunned from WCC Player of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, which is just still, to me, a borderline criminal offense by the WCC head coaches in this one. Graham had 22 points and 7 boards on 6 of 10 shooting in their first matchup in Spokane. He was one of the few players that was converting at the free throw line at the end of that game, really helped them put that one on ice. In the second game at the Chase Center, he had 26 points and 7 boards on 9 of 12 shooting. He is going to be the difference maker here. The biggest storyline coming into this game is how is San Francisco going to stop Graham Ike? Because Gonzaga is not going to do anything different unless forced to. Unless Coach G goes with a zone defense and tries to neutralize Graham's impact there, force Gonzaga to beat him from beyond the arc, which is probably not a bad strategy because your strategies up to this point defending Graham Ike have not worked. San Francisco is foul prone. Jonathan Mobo is foul prone. Playing Graham one-on-one has not worked. Playing Graham with a double team has not worked. If they have a zone defense in the bag, if it is something they have been able to work on and perfect, or at least get to a capable point where they can defend Gonzaga capably with that defense, I think there's a reasonable chance they may attempt to do that. Because I don't think Chris Grossen is a good coach. He's a borderline great coach. He's done some excellent work at the San Francisco program. He's been a Division I coach for 20 years as an assistant before getting this head coaching job. He knows his stuff. And I just don't think they're going to go into this game with anything resembling the same strategy they've used against Graham Ike because it's cost them 2 critical games. So expect to see something different. If I knew what it was, I'd tell you, I promise, but I don't. I don't know what it's going to be. Zone is a theory. It's a logical theory. It could be immediate double teams. It could be immediate triple teams. There's various things they could attempt to do. If anybody knew exactly how to neutralize Graham Ike, they would try it. They could try to get him in foul trouble. He's gotten much better on that end of the floor of kind of avoiding significant foul issues. That's obviously something that would be a problem because Braden Huff, while he's a good offensive player, and I think he's capable of scoring successfully against San Francisco, depending how they defend him, he's more of a liability defensively. And I think Jonathan Mobo, if San Francisco could get him really kind of riled up and get him in a position where he's trying to score the basketball, he could do some damage against Braden Huff. So that's the matchup to watch. Certainly there's a lot of great guard play between these two teams. Marcus Williams has played phenomenal all season long. Malik Thomas played really well in that first half against Gonzaga in the Chase Center. He's a very talented player as well. Mike Sheriff-Johns hasn't really taken that leap that we expected to see from him in his sophomore year after a good but not great freshman year at Dayton, but he's very talented. He's also 6'8", so he could cause some nightmare issues for Gonzaga. Of course, Gonzaga, Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman have been fantastic, particularly the last few months of the season. Going to need them to have a big game here against the Dons. The other big storyline here is not only if Gonzaga can win this game, can advance the WCC Championship game, something they've done every year under Coach Mark Few, but it's who are they going to play? Because everybody expects it to be St. Mary's. Everybody expects it to be St. Mary's. And you know what? It's probably going to be. But they're playing a Santa Clara team that is pretty darn good. Santa Clara snuck past San Diego. Shout out to Steve Lavin, by the way, and that Torero's team. I've been critical of Steve Lavin on this podcast, and they had a really good season. Really good year. A lot of freshmen came in. You saw some development for them throughout the year. I'm impressed by that program and the direction they're going if he can keep those core pieces around entering the transfer portal season. But Santa Clara snuck by him. That game, 6 p.m. on Monday on ESPN. Like I said, the Gaels won on the road against Santa Clara earlier this year, 73-49. That was Santa Clara's next game after they beat Gonzaga. I think they had a little bit of a hangover in that one, and St. Mary's came in and just wiped the floor with them. Then the return game in Moraga, St. Mary's still won. As we know, they went undefeated in the WCC until Gonzaga came to town, but they only won that one by 5. And that feels more appropriate. St. Mary's is not 24 points better than Santa Clara. They're probably a little better than 5 points better than Santa Clara just in general, but Santa Clara can cause problems. They're the 5th tallest team in the country in terms of average height. I'm very intrigued by this matchup. Carlos Marshall had 1 point in the first matchup. He had 23 in the second. Adama Alphabal had 4 points in that first matchup against St. Mary's. He had 18 in the second. If those guys can get going, if those guys can have big games offensively for Santa Clara, I think there's a real chance here. Joshua Jefferson played both times for the Gaels against the Broncos. Mason Forbes did virtually nothing in those 2 games. Now he's going to be asked to play a bigger role. Herb Sendek is a great coach. He's going to find ways to exploit the mismatches with Mason Forbes. Forbes is a great defender, but he doesn't do much offensively. If Santa Clara is able to play really good defensively because they don't have to guard Mason Forbes, that potentially forces Randy Bennett to make substitutions, to play Luke Barrett more. Lots of intrigue in this game as well. So if you're a Gonzaga fan, which many of you, most of you probably are, you are probably still rooting for Santa Clara if you want an easier path for Gonzaga to win. But Santa Clara is not an easy team for Gonzaga. In fact, they're a really tough matchup for the Zags because of that height, because of that length, because of the talent of that guard room. Both, whether it's Santa Clara or St. Mary's that Gonzaga plays, again, assuming they get by San Francisco, both of those are tough matchups. But I think that game is well worth watching because I don't think it's a gimme that St. Mary's is going to win. Having said that, I also wouldn't be shocked if St. Mary's kind of rolls and wins that one fairly handily. They're a very, very good team, but that's going to be a very interesting matchup. These are 4 very good teams, very chalk up to this point in the WCC tournament, but these are 4 fun teams and 2 really good matchups that we got on Monday evening. But we're going to look ahead to the offseason. We're going to answer some mailbag questions about who's going to start at the 3 next year, how Mark Few might attack the transfer portal, all of that coming up. After a word from today's sponsor, Amazon Fire TV. Folks, Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. And Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's March Madness or opening weekend for Major League Baseball, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. I have Amazon Fire Sticks on every single TV in my house because I love the layout. I love the user experience. The remote is super handy. It has little buttons that take you directly to Prime or Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu. Those are the ones that we use. So it's great to have the button that just takes you straight there. Fire TV also recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. So you can check out Locked On shows on Fire TV. It also lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep you up to date on the latest world of sports. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is also brought to you by Gametime. The major conference tournaments are this week. The WCC Tournament getting underway for Gonzaga tonight. Maybe you're trying to find last-minute tickets. Maybe you got a free flight to Vegas and you're trying to head out there and you're trying to figure out where you can get some tickets. Check out Gametime. It is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, Gametime has got you covered. Check out exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, with the Gametime guarantee, you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime, where you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's $20 off your first purchase at Gametime with code LOCKEDON. Terms do apply. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2 here. Still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are moving into the mailbag portion of today's episode. We've got a handful of questions, a lot of questions about the offseason, about the transfer portal, kind of a lot of questions we're going to lump together here to talk about in this second segment. This first one comes from Jackie on Discord, who says, I know this is tough to answer so early in the 2024-25 season. Yeah, we're not even in the 24-25 season yet, but let's assume every current player who's eligible returns, including Steele Venters. Do you see Venters starting before Stromer? Stromer had a year of experience on the court with the Zags, while Venters is on the sidelines with his injury. For the sake of assumption, let's exclude any potential transfers or recruits. Yeah, to me, Steele Venters is pretty clearly the starter at the 3. And this is a conversation that I almost guarantee, not almost, I guarantee we will have 5 times this offseason. It's going to be a continuous mailbag question. It's going to be a continuous conversation, and for good reason, because Dusty Stromer started half the season, a third of the season, whatever it was, as a true freshman, had some really big performances early in the year, was great in that USC game. Obviously, we started to see him struggle as the year went on, as I think there was some fatigue that sets in. Freshman fatigue is absolutely a real thing. I think he was asked to do a lot more than maybe he expected to do. Frankly, maybe that he was ready to do. Mark Few made what we've talked about as being one of the better decisions, in-game coaching decisions, lineup decisions that we've ever seen him make, by replacing Stromer in the starting lineup with Ben Gregg. Ben adds more rebounding. He adds more experience. He adds just a lot of tenacity to the lineup. He's a better three-point shooter, consistency-wise, than Stromer. And not only did the addition of Ben to the starting lineup help because of Ben's performance, it helped Dusty. And I think that's the key. Dusty has had a good freshman season. The majority of his success has been as a bench player. I don't see Mark Few thrusting him back into the starting lineup next year when they have another option. Beyond that, Mark Few very, very rarely starts younger players over older players unless they so obviously deserve it. Think Chet Holmgren, think Jalen Suggs. There are other obvious examples besides those two, but those are the clear runners in that case. Most of the time, Mark Few will start the veteran guy. Steele Venters was brought to this program to start at the 3. And that was the plan right up until the moment that his ACL tore and they knew that he wasn't going to be able to play this season. I don't think that has changed. Steele Venters provides floor spacing in a way that Dusty doesn't yet. Steele, we don't know if he provides a lot else. He's a good backdoor cutter, which I think kind of contributes to the floor spacing. Not only is he a good three-point shooter, but if defenders come out too far on him, he can backdoor cut, get to the rim, score that way. He's probably not as good of a defender as Dusty. I think going into the season, I think they may have been comparable just because Dusty, we've seen him make a lot of freshman mistakes because he's a freshman. By next year, I think Dusty's probably going to be the better defensive player, especially, depending on how Steele recovers. ACL injuries are tough. If he's 100%, maybe it's a little closer. Lateral movement is tough with ACL injuries. Lateral movement is what you need on defense. So that'll be an interesting element. Overall, I think Steele starts. I think he deserves to start. I think Dusty plays a bigger role. I think Dusty takes some of the minutes from Anton Watson's departure because Ben Gregg will absorb more minutes, and I think some of those extra minutes will go to Dusty. So I think we'll see Dusty play a bigger role next year, but I think Steele Venters will be the starter at the 3. Next kind of series of questions I lumped together here. First from Grand Chef Otto on Discord, who says, what are the biggest personnel wants for the team this offseason? Seems to me we have depth in forwards even with Anton leaving. We don't really have a shot blocker. Similarly, Austin via Discord asked a pair of questions I'm going to read here. He says, now that we are approaching the end of the season, the start of the transfer portal is nearly here. For right now, we are only losing Anton. How aggressively, if at all, do you think the staff will be hunting in the transfer portal? And then he followed that up a few days later by asking, with the transfer portal now open, with what potential type of player do you see Gonzaga pursuing? Do you see them looking for an Anton replacement like Javon Porter from Pepperdine, or do you go with a totally different type of player? Okay, a couple notes here. 1, the transfer portal is not officially open. The transfer portal opens the day after Selection Sunday, March 18th, so a week and a day after many of you are listening to this. The announcements we have seen, like Javon Porter from Pepperdine, like Houston Willett from Pepperdine, like a handful of other guys, are basically them announcing their intention to enter the transfer portal. They have not officially entered the transfer portal yet. No matter what you see, they have not, because it is not open. You are not able to do that. Just want to make that exceptionally clear. It doesn't really change anything, just an important note, just in terms of what is actually happening. I don't think the Zags will go after a WCC guy, just to toss the Javon Porter stuff out there. He's great. He's a decent fit on the roster, I think, as a floor spacing big man. He's not as good of a defender as Anton Watson. Few are. I don't remember Mark Few ever adding a WCC player via transfer directly from a WCC school. Somebody, if you notice, if you're screaming at me that you know somebody, leave it in the comments for sure. Obviously, transfers have become much more common in recent years, but I just don't think it's going to happen. We've seen WCC to WCC transfers. UN Misowski was phenomenal at San Diego for 3 or 4 years, went to San Francisco for another final season, was great there. But I just don't, Mark Few hasn't historically done that. I don't think that's going to change. In terms of where Gonzaga goes in the portal, obviously this is a big caveat. It depends what else happens. If Anton Watson is the only player who leaves this roster, which is possible, I don't know how likely it is. I don't know whether we will see other players decide to transfer, decide to move on professionally, decide to go to Europe and play. Like, those things could happen. But there's nobody who's very obviously likely to leave outside of Anton Watson. So if that is the only departure, next year's starting lineup, pretty easy to predict. Ryan Nembhard at the 1, Nolan Hickman at the 2, Steele Venters at the 3, Ben Gregg at the 4, Graham Ike at the 5. You have Braden Huff and Dusty Stromer coming off the bench. Again, the Stromer-Venters one is a conversation, but those 7 players are in your rotation guaranteed. You also have Luka Krajinovic, you have Jun-Suk Yo, and you have Pavle Stosic, all competing for rotation minutes as well. There's just not a lot of room. I don't think Stosic is a rotation player next year. Frankly, I don't think Yo or Krajinovic are big-time rotation players next year, but they're also going to play. I think if you are going to add in the transfer portal and everybody's coming back except Anton Watson, I think the only obvious direction you go is the veteran guard route, the Aaron Cook, the Gino Crandall, that route. Admon Gilder to an extent, similar. Ryan Woolridge. Those guys were starters. Gilder came off the bench in the second half of the year after Joel Ayayi replaced him, but that's the direction you go. A bigger guard coming off the bench, I think, would be great. I also think the reintroduction of Steele Venters kind of gives you that already. Steele's more of a 3 than a 2, but he could play the 2. You could have some lineups where Steele's at the 2, Dusty's at the 3, and one of Nembhard or Hickman's on the bench. I think that's something we'll see next year. Again, if the staff feels Krajinovic is ready to play 15 minutes a game, they may not need to pursue anybody in the transfer portal. I think it might be a quieter year. Now, again, this changes if somebody enters the portal. If one of those bench guys decides they want to go back to Europe or go back to, go play somewhere else professionally. If, one of the starters decides they want to go to the NBA or try their hand professionally or transfer, like, all that could happen. I don't see a lot of obvious avenues where we see that. So my expectation is the Zags pursue a bigger veteran third guard, a 6'4", 6'5", kind of hybrid 1-2 guard who can play 12 to 15 minutes per game, put a little less pressure on Krajinovic to be a big-time contributor right away. That feels like an obvious need. Grand Chef Otto mentioned a shot blocker. I 100% agree. Gonzaga doesn't have a shot blocker, but I don't think they're going to pursue a rotation big because they have Graham Ike, they have Ben Gregg, they have Braden Huff. I know they're playing 4 bigs this year. That is an anomaly. That is not something they typically do. So I don't think that we're going to see them pursue a big, even if they do need shot blocking. I just don't see that being an area that they really pursue in a big way this offseason. Final question here. The second segment comes from Jeff via Gmail. He says, several of the teams that are likely to be seeded 2 through 4 in the NCAA tournament, he mentions Arizona, Alabama, Marquette, and Kansas, are showing some major flaws. Additionally, teams like Iowa State and Auburn are good, but they've had problems winning away from home. With the way Gonzaga is playing right now and the fact that they could be a 6 or a 7 seed, how excited are you for the draw the Zags could get a week from now? He follows that up by saying, what gives you more anxiety, the wait till you get to see the bracket revealed on Selection Sunday or the wait for games to start on Thursday, Friday after Selection Sunday? I'll answer the second one first, purely because of my professional career, because of the Locked On College Basketball podcast, which if you folks have not listened to that, I'm a co-host on that show. It is fantastic. My co-host Isaac Shade, host of Locked On Tar Heels. We have so much fun on that show, but we work our butts off. Selection Sunday is probably going to be a 9 to 10 hour day, the majority of it spent behind a microphone. So in terms of what makes me more anxious, getting ready for Selection Sunday does, because we're going to be recording live during the event. We're going to be doing a full hour bracket breakdown show after the event. We're going to do another show. We're going to do our own individual shows for Zags and Heels. It's going to be a crazy, fun, exciting, exhausting day. So I'm anxious for that purely from a professional standpoint. Because Gonzaga is safely in the field, but because we also, they're not a guaranteed 1 seed like they've been in the last couple of years or most of the last few years. There's a bit more anxiety of like, I'm not worried they're not going to make it, obviously, but like I'm a little worried. Like, could the committee, give them 8, which would just feel really crappy. I'll be more anxious about it if they lose to St. Mary's. If they don't lose to St. Mary's, or if they beat San Francisco, beat St. Mary's again, the odds of them dropping below a 7 are really slim. So anxious isn't really the right word in that situation. And as for after selection Sunday, I love the few days before the tournament. It's just excitement. Yeah, there's anticipation, but it's excitement. Filling out the bracket, refilling out the bracket, trying again, knowing that you're not going to do well, all that stuff. I love that period of time. So I think that I'm more anxious leading into selection Sunday. In terms of like Gonzaga seeding and some of those 2 through 4 seeds, yeah, Gonzaga could end up with a pretty good draw here. You mentioned Marquette. If Tyler Kolek is healthy, Marquette's scary. I don't know that they really qualify. They struggled at the end of the year because Tyler Kolek was hurt. And in fact, in 2 of their games where they did not have Kolek, they had 7 and 6 assists as a team. Kolek averages 8. He's the Big East player of the year last year. He's the Big East first teamer this year because he's that good. If he's healthy, they're really good. Arizona, I think, is scary for Gonzaga too, just because the Few versus Lloyd thing. They'll be ready for each other, but I think Arizona's. I don't really want to face Arizona. I think they're pretty good. Auburn, yeah, I think they got a lot of depth, but they don't have a lot of super high end talent. I think Gonzaga can win that one. Iowa State, good defensive team, a little more inconsistent offensively, struggle away from Ames. Yeah, I think that's a potential win for Gonzaga as well. So all that to say, there are a lot of 2-3 seeds that are vulnerable this year. Gonzaga is playing better than many of them. And I think that I've said this on the show before, and I'll repeat it again. There are not any teams that want to face Gonzaga leading into the Sweet 16. None of them. Not a single one of those teams that's going to be on that 2-3 line is like, yep, that's the draw we want. Most of them would rather play St. Mary's or pick a handful of other teams that are going to be on that 6-7 seed line. Gonzaga is not the team any of them want to face, and I do not blame them. Well, Isiah Harwell mentioned his favorite part of his Gonzaga official visit. We're going to talk about that, as well as Lisa Fortier being up for another major award. Kelly Olynyk having a new deal with the Toronto Raptors. Zags baseball wins a series at home. All of that coming up after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find the quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster, and they do it for free. Thankfully, LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire. And it gives you access to professionals that you cannot find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process both easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and they may not have the time or the resources to hire. So they're constantly finding ways to make the process even easier. For example, they just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, closing out the show with a couple updates kind of scattered around some stuff, frankly, that I was planning to post on Friday's show until I ended up going to the hospital for the birth of my baby. So we're going to get to some of that stuff here right now. Isiah Harwell, one of the top prospects in the class of 2025, number 5 ranked prospect, in fact, in On3's recent update. He spoke about his official visit to Gonzaga. He did an interview with On3, talked about a handful of different topics. A reminder for those of you who haven't heard as many of the recruiting updates, Isiah Harwell, 6'5" guard from Pocatello, Idaho, plays high school basketball at Wasatch Academy in Mount Pleasant, Utah, the same high school that Nolan Hickman attended before, of course, he came to Gonzaga. Averaged 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists on Nike's EYBL circuit. Really, really talented player. And he has a top 9 that includes Gonzaga along with North Carolina, Houston, Alabama, UCLA, Baylor, Texas, Cal, and Idaho State. A couple of those schools might stand out to you. Idaho State is where his dad went to school. His dad, Ron Harwell, very talented player, hometown team for him, so that's why they are on the list. Cal, one of their assistants, Amaro Morgan, grew up with Harwell's dad. So that's why those programs are on there. They stand out a little bit of being not the same caliber as those other programs. Harwell has indicated he plans to visit all 9. However, he has only visited one, and that was Gonzaga. and he was scheduled to visit in early February when they played St. Mary's on the 3rd. That visit did not happen because Harwell suffered an injury. He then rescheduled to come to visit Gonzaga in 3 weeks later when they played Santa Clara at home on the 24th. To me, Harwell not having scheduled any visits with the other programs and yet very quickly rescheduling his visit to Spokane, it doesn't mean nothing. It doesn't mean nothing. I don't know how much it means. Maybe he's trying really hard to schedule stuff at Carolina and Houston, and they're kind of rebuffing him. Even if that's true, that's still a pretty good sign for Gonzaga if they're the school that is interested in getting him on campus, and that's the school he's most interested in visiting. He spoke about his visit. Here are his direct quotes from an article on On3 by Jamie Shaw. He says, quote, "The atmosphere was great. I knew they had good fans, but I didn't know they brought it like that. It's a small school, but they definitely brought the energy. It was crazy there. My favorite part of campus was Coach Mark Few's office. I mean, he had so many trophies in there. Just being in there, you can tell he is just a winner." Excellent quote, excellent stuff. He goes on, he also says, quote, "Going on that visit, I was able to get closer with everyone there. I finally got to meet them all in person, so that was cool. The coaching staff, the trainers, the team, I got to meet everyone. It was amazing." Still no real update. It's again, if Harwell wants to visit all these schools, this may be a while till we get a firm update on him, but he is a really talented player in that 2025 class when Hickman and Nembhard are going to be out the door. Potentially could be a one and done starting caliber player for this program, or at least a starter from day one. Very, very intriguing prospect to continue to keep eyes on for Gonzaga. Couple other things wanted to talk about here. Lisa Fortier, top 5 finalist for the Kathy Delaney Smith Mid-Major Coach of the Year Award. She was a mid-season finalist for this award. Now she is in the top 5, alongside Carly Tabot Dudonis from Fairfield, Vanessa Blair Lewis from George Mason, Kevin Borseth at Green Bay, and Linda LaRock at UNLV. LaRock is a great coach. UNLV is a great program. Nobody on this list holds a candle to Lisa Fortier and the Zags. She should win this award, and it shouldn't be close. 29-2, undefeated in WCC, 11th in the net. Lisa Fortier has a very, very strong argument to be the coach of the year. Straight up, number 1 coach of the year. Mid-major coach of the year, she's a dang shoo-in my mind. Kelly Olynyk, 2-year extension with the Toronto Raptors. This is an amazing deal for Kelly Olynyk, not just financially, not just from a stability perspective, although both those things are critically true, but because it's his hometown team. Kelly Olynyk is the team captain for Team Canada, the senior men's national team, the team that's going to represent Canada in the Olympics this year in Paris. He is the captain. He is Canada basketball, and now he gets an extension to spend at least the next 2 years playing for the hometown team in Toronto. Exceptional stuff for Kelly. I'm so excited for him. I'm so happy for him. I overlapped with him all 4 years that I was at Gonzaga. He's a great dude. He completely deserves this. He's been on 5 different teams since 2021, continues to get traded at the deadline, used as an asset because of his contract. I get it. I understand how the NBA works. I know he gets it too. But how happy is how happy is his family, his friends, his wife, to be settling into Canada, to Toronto, where he's from, where he loves. Just an all-around great story. He's played 12 games with Toronto so far as I record this on Monday morning. 3 of them were starts, averaging about 10 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, and just under 2 steals per game. Final portion of the show, Jeff via Gmail asked about the Gonzaga baseball team. He says, quote, "How about Gonzaga baseball's series win over Minnesota after their unfortunate 1-9 start to the year? Could this be a sign the Zags are turning it on after their rough start? Or does this show that even in baseball, there are major advantages to playing at home, or perhaps a combo?" I think you forgot a critical element. Pretty simple one, to be honest. UCLA, Vanderbilt, and BYU, the three teams Gonzaga played up to this point, they're just better than Minnesota. I think that's a big part of it. Minnesota's a good team, good Big Ten team. Other 3 teams are just better. Beyond that, home field advantage is critical in baseball, arguably more critical than it is in basketball. Basketball obviously has the fan element that baseball does not have and will not ever have. But baseball, your field is different. The weather is different. The structure of the field, I mean, literally the dimensions of the outfield are different. The wind blows in a different way. Like, home field advantage in baseball is crucial. So I think absolutely that plays a role, especially in a late February, early March series. when the weather in Spokane is biting cold. Now, the boys in Minnesota are used to that, so they understand that cold weather. But, you're not bringing UCLA to Spokane in February and beating the doors off of them because they've never played where their hands are freezing. But it is an absolute factor. Home field advantage is important in baseball. Minnesota's not as good as the 3 teams Gonzaga played series against already. And Gonzaga's team is probably coming together. It is a combination of all 3 of those things. I'm excited to see where this season continues to go for the baseball squad. So much youth, so much inexperience on a smaller scale than the men's basketball team, which obviously has higher expectations. I think we're going to see this team gel as the year goes on. And I'm excited to see how that looks as the weather gets warmer, as they get into conference play where they're expected to finish 6th. I would be pretty surprised if they finish lower than 4th. I'll throw that out there as my prediction right now. That's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We'll be back on Tuesday recapping Gonzaga's game tonight against the Dons of San Francisco, getting you ready for hopefully what will be a Gonzaga-St. Mary's WCC Championship matchup on Tuesday. Maybe it'll be Gonzaga-Santa Clara. Hopefully, at least it's Gonzaga, and somebody will get you ready for that. And then, of course, after that, get you ready for Selection Sunday and what this NCAA tournament field might look like. Thanks to those of you who have made the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And until tomorrow, as always, go Zags.